Rome, the 20th of December, year 69. A man is being dragged down the Gemonian stairs, his hands bound behind his back. The soldiers hold a sword point under his chin so the crowd can see his face, and so he cannot lower it. 8 months ago, this man commanded the most feared army in the Roman world. 8 months ago, the Senate of Rome proclaimed him emperor. Now the crowd pelts him with dung and calls him glutton, arsonist, traitor. Out of everything he said that day, the historians kept a single sentence. And yet I was once your emperor. His name was Aulus Vitellius. And nearly everything you have ever heard about him, the feasts, the sloth, the 2,000 fish served at a single dinner, was written by men who answered to the dynasty that killed him. Even his face is not his own. The most famous portrait of Vitellius in the world, copied for 500 years by Europe's greatest painters, turns out to be another man entirely. Part 1 of this story showed how emperors could be made outside Rome. This is the story of the year's final lesson, and it is the harder one. The man who wins the last battle of a civil war also wins its history. A quick recap for anyone joining now. In June of 68, Nero killed himself and ended a dynasty. Galba, governor of Spain, took the throne and lost it in 7 months by refusing to pay the soldiers who made him. Otho bought the Praetorian Guard, wore the purple for 95 days, and killed himself after losing one battle to stop the civil war from grinding on. It did not stop, because the army that beat him, the legions of the Rhine frontier, had already hailed their own commander as emperor. In April of 69, Aulus Vitellius entered Rome at the head of the most powerful army in the empire, which left him with a problem no Roman had ever solved. Winning a civil war is a military operation. Ending one is not. Put yourself where Vitellius stood in the spring of 69, knowing only what he knew. His objective was not conquest. He already held Rome. His objective was acceptance, to convert a soldier's coup into a government that the Senate, the provinces, and above all the other armies would recognize as legitimate. And every road to that goal ran through money he did not have. Nero's spending and Galba's confiscations had left the treasury hollow. Yet 2 entire army groups from the Rhine now camped in and around Rome, waiting for the rewards their new emperor owed them. Galba had died for refusing to pay a donative. Vitellius had watched it happen. His first moves were the moves of a man who understood the problem. Tacitus, who had no love for Vitellius, still records them. He declined the title of Caesar at first, playing the reluctant servant of the state. He attended the Senate and let it debate. He banished the astrologers, courted the crowd, and staged the ordinary theater of a legitimate emperor. But underneath the theater, he made one decision that would arm his enemies. He disbanded the Praetorian Guard that had backed Otho, and with it he cashiered and scattered the units that had fought against him, including the legions of the Danube frontier. Defeated soldiers do not stop being soldiers. They start being recruits for whoever comes next. Here is the balance sheet of the empire in the summer of 69 as Vitellius had to read it. In his column, the Rhine legions, the seat of government, and formal recognition from the Senate. Against him, nothing declared, but everything unsettled. On the Danube, 4 legions that owed him a humiliation. In the east, where Rome kept its wars with Parthia and Judea, 7 more legions that had sworn their oaths and then gone quiet. 60,000 swords watching. The frontier armies had learned the year's open secret, that emperors could be made far from Rome, and every one of them could count. It broke on the 1st of July. In Alexandria, the prefect of Egypt administered the oath of allegiance not to Vitellius, but to the general commanding the war in Judea. Titus Flavius Vespasianus, Vespasian, a tax farmer's grandson, a muleteer's nickname, a man who had once been dismissed from Nero's court for falling asleep at the emperor's poetry recital. Within 2 days, his own legions in Judea followed. Then Syria, under its governor Mucianus, with 3 more legions. The east had stopped being quiet. By August, the Danube Legions declared too, and the men Vitellius had humiliated in April had an emperor to avenge themselves under. The Flavian war plan was patient, and it was not really a battle plan at all. Vespasian himself went to Egypt. Egypt was Rome's granary. Hold Alexandria, and you hold a hand on the city of Rome's windpipe without drawing a sword. Mucianus would march overland toward Italy with a picked force, slowly arriving as a governor rather than a conqueror. The Danube Legions were told to wait at Aquileia, at the head of the Adriatic, until the armies could combine. It was careful. It was designed to win in the spring with minimal Roman blood. It also, not incidentally, guaranteed that the men arriving to collect the victory would be Vespasian and Mucianus and nobody else. And it lasted precisely as long as it took one man to read it. Marcus Antonius Primus commanded the 7th Legion on the Danube. Tacitus sketches him in one line, a man ready of hand and speech, expelled from the Senate under Nero for forging a will, restored by the civil wars, in peace a disgrace, in war not to be despised. Primus looked at the careful Flavian plan and made a soldier's argument against it. Delay favored Vitellius, who could pay, feed, and fortify. Speed favored the Danube army, whose whole advantage was fury. So he did not wait at Aquileia. With the vanguard of the Danube legions, he crossed into Italy on his own judgment, ahead of his orders and ahead of Mucianus, and drove for the river Po. The Vitellian position in northern Italy then began to rot from inside. At Ravenna, the admiral of the Adriatic fleet took his ships over to Vespasian, and Caecina, the general Vitellius trusted with the whole northern army, the same Caecina who had won the war for him in April, tried to take that army across with him. And Fabius Valens, the other general who had made Vitellius emperor, the one man who might have steadied the army, lay ill far to the south and started north too late to matter. Caecina's own soldiers refused to follow him over. They arrested their commanding general, put him in chains, and chose to fight the coming battle leaderless rather than switch sides. Remember that detail? In the year 69, the armies of Rome had opinions of their own, and they had learned what those opinions were worth. The armies met on the 24th of October, on the same stretch of road near Bedriacum where Vitellius's men had won the empire 6 months earlier. The battle began near sundown, and then simply did not stop. 2 Roman armies, identically equipped, identically trained, fought on through the dark, and the night stripped away every advantage except endurance. Men killed by lamplight from a captured artillery piece. The 7th Legion lost its eagle for a time, and a centurion died winning it back. Tacitus records brothers recognizing each other over the wounds they had just dealt. Then, near dawn, the 3rd Legion turned to face the rising sun and cheered. They had served for years in Syria, where saluting the sunrise was the custom of the country. The exhausted Vitellians did not know that. They knew only that fresh troops had arrived from the east, or seemed to. Believing it was enough, the line broke. The beaten army fell back on Cremona, and Cremona paid for it. The city had stood for 286 years, a Roman colony older than Rome's empire. The Flavian army took it, and for 4 days they sacked it, killing, burning, and selling what was left. Tacitus writes that 40,000 armed men burst in, and that afterward the shame was real enough that soldiers were forbidden to keep citizens as prisoners. Who gave the order, or whether any order was given at all, the sources do not agree on, and Tacitus was writing when the guilty were beyond punishment and the dead beyond help. Antonius Primus had won the war in one night. What his army did in the 4 days after would follow his name through the histories. Both things are true, and this channel will not choose between them for you. Every campaign is a contest of 2 intentions, and the Flavian intention deserves the same scrutiny we gave Vitellius. Except it was never one intention. It was 3. Vespasian, in Egypt, needed the war won without wearing its blood because a new dynasty founded on massacring Roman citizens inherits Vitellius's problem, not Augustus's throne. Mucianus, marching slowly through the Balkans, needed to arrive as the indispensable man, the governor who would hold Rome for an absent emperor. And Primus needed the exact opposite, a war so decisively won, so personally his, that no one could shelve him afterward. 3 allies, 3 finish lines. You can still read how that triangle fought itself, because Tacitus preserved the paper trail. Mucianus wrote to the advancing army in phrases built to face both ways, urging speed if speed succeeded, counseling caution if caution proved wise, so that whatever happened, his letters would have said so. Tacitus, who read men for a living, calls the ambiguity deliberate. Primus answered by being unanswerable, marching faster than instructions could reach him. Vespasian, further away than either, wrote little and collected the loyalty of both. If you want to understand how the Flavian dynasty would govern for the next 26 years, the campaign of 69 is the audition tape. There was a fourth front in the Flavian War, and it fired no arrows. From the moment of the proclamation, stories began to travel. A captured Judean commander named Josephus had prophesied to Vespasian's face that he would wear the purple, and was released, and would spend the rest of his life writing history under Flavian patronage. Remember his employer when you read him. In Alexandria, Tacitus reports, Vespasian healed a blind man and a lame man before witnesses, signs that the gods had chosen him. Tacitus reports it. He does not quite endorse it. The point is not whether the omens were true. The point is that the Flavians understood before they even held Rome that a new dynasty needs a story more than it needs a bloodline. They were writing the legend while the war was still undecided. The instrument of the Flavian victory deserves its own file, the legions of the Danube frontier. These were not the pampered garrison of a capital. They watched the empire's hardest river line, and several, like the 3rd Legion Gallica, had rotated through the eastern wars against Parthia, picking up scars, doctrine, and as we saw at dawn outside Cremona, eastern habits of worship. In April, they had backed Otho, arrived late, and been treated by the victors as a defeated tribe. Units broken up, officers cashiered, honor confiscated. Vitellius's settlement gave them nothing to lose that they still possessed. Military historians will tell you that morale is a force multiplier. The Danube Legions in 69 are the textbook case where the multiplier was grievance. 20,000 men who fought through an October night on rage and a debt of humiliation against an army that had everything except a reason. By December, Vitellius knew the arithmetic had failed, and he tried something no Roman emperor had ever attempted. He tried to resign. On the 18th of December, he came down from the palace in morning dress and offered the empire back to the Senate, to anyone. He spoke of being allowed simply to live as a private man. Tacitus says he wept, and that some in the crowd wept with him. His soldiers and the crowd refused to let him. There was no legal mechanism, no precedent, and by now, no exit. Vespasian's brother Flavius Sabinus, the prefect of the city, judged the reign finished and occupied the Capitoline Hill with a small force, taking his nephew Domitian with him. Vitellian soldiers stormed the hill the next day. In the fighting, fire took hold, and the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the holiest building in the Roman world, the house of the god who guaranteed Rome itself, burned to the ground. Tacitus stops his narrative cold to say that accounts disagreed about who set the fire, and he declines to rule. What no account disputed was the meaning. Roman soldiers had burned Rome's covenant with its gods over the question of which Roman got to sit in a chair. Sabinus was captured and killed, and his body was thrown down the Gemonian stairs. Domitian, 18 years old, and one day to be emperor himself, escaped the burning hill disguised in the linen robes of a priest of Isis. 2 days later, the Danube Legions fought their way into Rome street by street. Suetonius records where they found Vitellius hiding in a doorkeeper's lodge with a dog tied at the door and furniture pushed against it. You already know how this ends, because you watched it happen at the top of this episode. The stairs, the sword under the chin, the one sentence. On the 20th of December, Vitellius was killed on the Gemonian stairs, and his body was dragged on a hook to the Tiber. He was the 3rd emperor to die in Rome in 11 months. He would be the last for over a century. The reckoning held open, as always. State the goal plainly. Vitellius set out to convert a mutiny into a legitimate government, to pay 2 armies from an emptied treasury, and to be accepted by an empire that had just learned emperors were disposable. State what happened? He held recognition for 8 months, and he never solved the money, and the soldiers he punished became the army that destroyed him. Judged from inside his situation, his failure was specific, not cartoonish. He inherited Galba's dilemma, pay or die, and discovered its second edge. Paying one army means choosing it over the others, and the others can count. Nothing in that requires the 2,000 fish. And then there is the version you inherited. The Flavians rebuilt the Temple of Jupiter. They minted coins, stamped Judea, captured to advertise the war Vespasian had actually won. They built the Colosseum, and the dedication, reconstructed by the epigrapher Geza Alfoldi from the rivet holes of its vanished bronze letters, says it plainly, built from the spoils of war. When Vespasian's son complained that taxing the city's urine was beneath the dignity of the new house, Suetonius says the emperor held a coin under his nose and asked if it smelled. Money does not stink. Neither, it turns out, does history once it has been washed and reissued by the house that survived. Suetonius, writing under that house, counted the fish. The Renaissance carved the wrong man's face and called it Vitellius, and painters used that face for 5 centuries as shorthand for a man about to fall. Part 1 of this story ended with the secret of empire. Emperors could be made outside Rome. Part 2 ends with the secret's price. Somebody still has to write down what happened. On the Gemonian stairs, Vitellius spent his last breath on a claim about the past. And yet I was once your emperor. The Flavians answered him with the future, in stone, in bronze, and in every history of that year you have ever read, including, be warned, this one.